Okay, folks, this is Picohan on the North American server, and this is Operation Cherry Blossom in the Cleveland. Cherry Blossom is one of the best farming operations available right now, and this is basically a demonstration of a pretty strong run in the Cleveland, which I generally consider to be a trap for this operation. More on that in a bit. In this run, I got what I consider to be the best spawn because it puts you the closest to this first group of destroyers that spawn to your left. The trick here is to not radar the destroyers immediately, because that will let you get closer to them before they react. And of course, for the Cleveland, it's just much easier to hit fast-moving destroyers when you are very close. These destroyers will torp you if you don't kill them fast enough, but since they start not loaded, just like any ships in randoms or in co-op, you don't have to worry about it till about the minute mark, and that's when I triggered the hydro. Furthermore, if you don't break up their formation enough, they will torp the transports, which will lose you a star.
Torpedoes, dead ahead.
But that is pretty rare, I would say. Here are the torps going for either some of the friendlies or the transports. The second part of this operation is really the first indicator that the Cleveland might not be the right fit for this operation. There's some Myokos that are bombarding your shore troops, and what you have to do is just shoot at them and make them start running away. While they are at max range and starting to accelerate, it can be very hard to hit them because of just how long the Cleveland's shells take to get to max range. If this were, say, the Baltimore, you would basically have multiple citadels on that first salvo. Luckily, you do have some ships that spawn closer to you that you can actually farm. You should not shoot at these guys unless you can't shoot at the Myokos or you've already gotten them moving, because then they may do too much damage to the troops and you will lose a star. I stuck with HE against the Ioba, but at those ranges, AP may have been better. There is a second Ioba behind the first one that you can farm as well, but really you should shoot the things that are farther ahead if you can. At this point, you're still trying to save the troops, and you should just keep pushing into that area until you clear out all the bots along the way. It's okay for some people to go back and crossfire those Iobas. The problem is it's the same as with the west push on Aegis. If one person or two people do it, it's great, but if everybody does it, then you lose the troops and you lose the star. The red flare illuminated zones are because it's supposed to be nighttime in this operation. The illuminated spots are a cool, visual feature, but in practice, it's not that relevant whether you're in or not in them. If you're in the red spots, it means that enemies can see you from much further away, and you may not be able to see them. It's not that relevant because you should be killing the bots fast enough such that they can't really focus fire you, whether you're in or not in the illuminated zones. Finally, if you are one of the lead ships in this area, the bots do try to torp you, so you should run your hydro accordingly. If you ran it at the beginning when the first batch of destroyers spawned, it should be off cooldown by now. You can also use your radar to keep detecting ships when they drop off, because the detection ranges at night are indeed smaller than they would be otherwise. And the amazingly balanced wargaming radar still goes the full 9-kilometer range. So we started turning back as soon as we saw the indication that we had saved the troops. The next wave of destroyers spawned in the north, but as you can see, since some of our ships turned back way earlier, the Charles Martel is in fact getting way too close, but either way, this wave will be dealt with, and we won't have anything to do for a little bit. And I guess this is really intentional because, as you can see in the west, we are getting some AI reinforcements. That little marker on the minimap is where one of the carriers will heal for a bit. So if you took damage in the first part, just turn back faster, you can get to that marker, heal a bit, and then continue on for the second half of the operation. Also, you can see that the night is now lifting, so visibility and such will once again be quote-unquote normal. If you get a ship out to the northwest fast enough, like this Cleveland maybe, you'll see something a bit odd, and that's the 3 Zows. You're not actually supposed to fight the 3 Zows, and they will actually run off the map. I believe the intent of those ships is to keep people from getting up there really early and spawn camping the ships that come out of that area. That being said, the middle north corner is actually a really good spot for something like the Cleveland, and we're gonna try to get there nonetheless later in the game. In the meantime, here comes the first wave of Sky Cancer, and typically these guys will go for the Fletchers, and you can just let them take out the Fletchers. But if you push up far enough, they will try to strike you, and you could consider it an opportunity to farm planes. But if you aren't careful, you can get focused down between the planes and the surface ships. Also, the planes will cross-drop you sometimes, and your defensive fire does not actually last long enough such that you can have it running all the way from when the first planes drop to when the last planes drop, because the drops are spread out over such a long period of time. That being said, you should use your defensive sometime toward the beginning or middle of this wave of planes, such that it will be up by the time the next wave comes. This second half of the operation is why I don't think the Cleveland is a particularly good choice. The targets you're going to be shooting at are cruisers and destroyers who are slowly driving around in circles. And for a Cleveland, these aren't the easiest targets to hit. It's also hard to close the distance to improve your accuracy because they will focus fire the closest ships. Pushing up in a bad way can also get you into some pretty nasty crossfires, not just from the guns of the surface ships, but also from their torps, and then from the torps from the aircraft as well. Of course, there's also very few islands you can use to block line of sight when you actually need that. Just like all those crappy high-tier maps that nobody likes anyway. Ultimately, getting to that corner I described is the solution to being able to close the distance with the Cleveland such that you can more effectively use your very good DPM. The best time to do this is during or after the second wave of planes come, because there won't be a third. I triggered my defensive to help out, but it really doesn't matter because we were moving away from the planes anyway. Trying to move up here maybe a little prematurely, and you can see the priority target indicator is already at 3. The Miyoko is a little close, so we're gonna have to kite for a little bit. But since he's so close, we're actually getting pretty good damage. Do note that if they set you on fire, they will switch to AP, so be very careful about showing broadside. On the flip side, if they're broadside, even at around 7 kilometers, you will start getting citadels, but only if the broadside is pretty flat. Now, though, we've kind of reached the promised land, and at this point, it's just kind of like normal cruiser things. The enemies spawn from the channel in the northwest, so what you're gonna do is you use the island to block line of sight from everything but the ship that's furthest to your left, and just keep hammering away at that guy. As you creep along this island, you'll also have more opportunities to use AP as you get closer. Furthermore, since there shouldn't be any more airstrikes at this time, and the only direction where torpedoes can come from is in the front, it's pretty safe to stay bow on to mitigate damage if you need to. The Cleveland is also really good at lobbing shells over this low island into the broadsides of looping ships like these Miyokos, even though I missed everything on that other guy. Of course, do use the radar and hydro accordingly, since the destroyers do like to smoke. But basically, once you start getting into this 6-7 kilometer range, you're starting to land a lot of hits, and you can really put that DPM to good use, whether it be HE or AP. Do note that Wargaming actually has put a mechanism into this operation to prevent everybody from doing this. There is an Atago earlier that will run from the spawn ahead of us down into the southwest corner, and if you don't send a ship or some ships to intercept him, you will lose a star, but he is not that difficult of a target to take out. Like many other operations, there's also a bit of a snowball effect here. Once you finally thin out the ships a little bit, you can be more aggressive, and that will actually let you take out the additional ships faster, because you can take shots like the one I took on that Ioba. Unfortunately, took a torp there because my last hacking was bad. I had actually slowed down in anticipation for torps, but then I didn't see the ones from the left and ran right into them. Once again, use AP on broadsides, especially at this range. Your shell switching is plenty fast enough to catch the broadsides, especially given how slowly the bots are moving. The final objective of the operation is to kill the airfields, but if you've gotten to this point and killed off all the ships, it's plenty reasonable to farm ships as they spawn between working on the aerodromes. The base is a little bit wonky to hit. You definitely want to use HE, but it's a little bit unclear where to shoot to maximize damage. That being said, with everybody shooting at them, they die pretty quickly, and this is pretty much the end of the operation. Just going to flash the results as usual. This was actually a pretty close game, given that we lost 3 ships and took almost the whole 20 minutes. If you have a good team, you can do this in under 15, but having a bad team is also what you need sometimes to get a good score. And close to 200k damage with 2600 base XP is a pretty good score for the Cleveland. We also shot a good mix of HE and AP, though fire damage was minimal because it's mostly cruisers and destroyers. One last thing to note is that this replay may already be obsolete because of carrier rework. We don't actually know how Wargaming is going to change it, but they've already removed the carriers from the original 4 operations, and probably something like that will happen here as well. That being said, this is the end of the video, and have a nice day.